Good afternoon. Welcome to the Housing, Safety, and Community Committee meeting. We will begin with a round of introductions. I am your chair, Victoria Watlington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am Lawana Mayfield, Council Member at Large and Vice Chair of Budget Governance and the Governmental Relations Committee.
Braxton Winston, Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilmember Johnson, can you hear us? If so, please introduce yourself. Looks like she's still having some trouble. So she'll introduce herself later on, but we have a quorum, given that she is online and joining us. We've also got a number of staff in the room joining us as well, and we will go ahead and begin with introduction.
Renee Askew, Assistant City Manager.
Sean Heath, Housing and Neighborhood Services.
Terry Bradley, Deputy Director for Community Relations.
Willie Ratchford, Director, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Community Relations Committee.
All right, thanks so much. We've got a number of additional visitors on our back wall, so we go ahead and get your introduction.
Mason Butner. I am a intern with the Charlotte City Attorney's Office.
Claire McGee, also a law student.
Anna Schloina, City Attorney's Office.
Hi, Mrs. Molina. Would you like to check your audio?
Yeah, I'm good. I can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Miss Johnson, did you want to check your audio?
Sure. Hi, Wendy.
Hello. All right. You all sound good. Thank you.
All right. Hi, Margaret. Councilmember Molina.
Rebecca Hefner, Housing and Neighborhood Services.
I'm fine, thank you.
Sarah Hazel, Chief Sustainability and Resiliency Officer.
Excuse me, council members online, we have begun introductions. If you could mute yourself, thanks so much.
Did you catch me? Sarah Hazel, Chief Sustainability and Resiliency Officer.
Again, Whitcomb, Housing and Neighborhood Services.
Harold Thompson, Housing and Neighborhood Services.
Thank you so much. And then on this side?
Vanessa Clark, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Community Relations Committee.
Warren Wooten, Housing and Neighborhood Services.
We've got 3 items on our agenda today. We'll begin with our deep dive of the Community Relations Committee. For those of you who have been tuning in with us, you'll know that we have been reviewing all of our city boards and commissions that are made up of our volunteer members of the community and making sure that we are getting the most out of the expertise of our volunteers on those boards and that we are opening up the lines of communication. So we wanted to make sure that from a Community Relations Committee standpoint, we had a clear update of what the work was, what help requests were, and how we could best leverage the CRC moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sean Heath.
And I'll be happy to turn it over to...
Yeah, so you stole my line.
Apologize, ACU.
So giving the presentation today, we have Willie Ratchford, who is the Director of Community Relations, and Deputy Director Terry Bradley. Up to you.
Right, thank you. So welcome to be here, first of all. I think the last time we were here, we kind of gave an overview of what community relations was, and you've asked us to come back to report some of the things that Community Relations Committee is working on. And I want to kind of go through the power slide, kind of highlighting some of those things. And it really want to start with, for over 60 years, CRC has represented an inclusive community and works to ensure fairness for all by removing barriers that impede the community from, living in harmony. And part of this process that they've gone through was over several months. The chair sat with the different subcommittees to kind of get an idea of what the issues were in the community. The committee itself serves as the eyes and ears of our community, letting us know what the issues are. And just listening to the subcommittee about the different issues and concerns, they captured that information. Next slide. So currently, there are 33 current members that are seated for the committee. We have a total of 45 members that are a part of this committee. And currently, only 33 are seated. 8 of those positions or seats are managed by or appointed by the mayor. 16 are appointed by the city council. And then you have the remaining 21 that are appointed by the county commission. For that, the CRC's primary function is to, again, serve as the eyes and ears of the community, serve and find out what the council initiatives are and see how they can serve to assist in those areas. We facilitate community conversations. We also are part of the community where we just try to remove the barriers that people in the community may not have access to certain services. We promote opportunities for respect and understanding among all of the residents. Next slide. So as I stated, in recent months, there was an analysis of all of the work that has been done. And in the summer, usually, there's a retreat that addresses those issues by planning the work for the next 3 to 5 years. So the subcommittee work had been in one format at one point in time, and they looked at it really hard and say, are these still the issues that are really impacting the community? There were some new initiatives that were coming up. There were also issues that were not really being represented at the table, but there are also issues that we were working on, but we might look at it in a different way. So the retreat the retreat was one for the committee members to get to know one another, find out and assess their skills, the abilities that they can work on different projects with. It was also just to kind of look at the plan of action of how do we address the work that the citizens really want us to be impactful on. They discussed the changes of the vision and also the mission, and then they developed a plan. Next slide. So we wanted to embrace the change, to accommodate the changing community and make up and considering the interests and talents of each person on the committee. They wanted to use their skill sets to kind of better align them with the work that the subcommittee work that they were getting ready to start working on. They evaluated each other and wanted to kind of gain more participation. So they wanted to see how we could get people more involved and more engaged. There was a decline in membership, and part of it was just the structure of how people were able to come to the committee meetings. Since COVID, it's been kind of a little shift in how we do business. And so they evaluated and said it might be something that we could offer a virtual component for them to start working virtually, so that would assist them to be more engaged in this work moving forward. Also, explored solutions to address other retention issues with regards to, you had committee members that would come in, they were excited about the work, but they might have more participation on one subcommittee than another. So what the thought was, let's make sure that each subcommittee had equitable support. So they looked at making sure that before they would go to a different subcommittee, that they were at least 8 persons to each subcommittee of the outline work. So, and that really helped out as well. So you're not getting more support in one area than the other. And again, it was better to address the concerns of the community and develop the work for the Community Relations Committee for the next year to 5 years. Next slide. So some of the previous subcommittees were communications, which was an opportunity for the community to know about the work of the Community Relations Committee and also to market what our events were. The next subcommittee was the crisis response. It focused on current community issues that needed long or short-term solutions or to be addressed. Also, we had education and young leaders, worked on work around the youth, We partnered with CMS and found educational resources and opportunities to work with different entities to help support the youth. Intercultural relations focused on the immigrant population, making sure that they had equitable opportunities to meet with council as well as other community work and had a seat at the table. Also, the Community Relations Committee helps plan the Martin Luther King holiday weekend. They also help plan the Police Community Relations Awards. Along with that, Police Community Relations also helps facilitate conversations and dialogues around police community relations matters. Programs and speakers was the subcommittee that addressed having a speaker at the full CRC meetings and also a different program. That was the kind of giving some different interests for the subcommittee members to kind of look at and have information around. So we would invite different speakers to come to that. And that's the makeup of the previous subcommittees. Currently, what we have, next slide, are the new subcommittees, which might have some variations of the previous subcommittees, but then we have some totally new ones. The community equity focuses on city most vulnerable areas. Or clients, our clients were like the youth, disability, people with disabilities, seniors, trying to make sure that their concerns were addressed. CRC Pride focuses on ways to engage or address the stigma and increase the acceptance where equity and inclusion are a part of that. The housing and economic is another group that they have started looking at, and it focuses on the providing resources and the needs through collaborations with local organizations. Public relation, which was what we still have in terms of just a marketing opportunity, focuses on communications with our monthly newsletter, and also making sure people were aware of the different events that we have going on. Race and cultural relations focuses on bringing conversations to the table to bring an exposure to prejudice and discrimination. Special events was just that, where all of the events that we talked about with the Police Community Relations, MLK, or any other event that may be looked at by the community, the field community that they would like to work on, it would go into special events now. One of the new events that would go on there would be supporting the fire department, making sure that they were honored and recognized as well. And then arts and environment is a new one as well. It focuses on ensuring that where there might be segments of the communities that might be not getting the arts, that they have an opportunity or equity opportunity to be exposed to the arts as well. And because if you look at different communities that may not have that exposure, that promotes an unhealth issue. Next slide. Community equity, again, one of the subcommittee's new initiatives would be put down the guns and work out and lift weights. That's just an opportunity for the youth to be involved in something other than some criminal engagement. They're looking at an opportunity to engage the youth in a different way. So they're starting this initiative, and that's one of the ones that they came up most recently, just giving them an exercise or another opportunity to do some different work. Next slide. CRC Pride. Recently, they just hosted a table at the 2023 Charlotte Pride Job Fair, and then also they planned the annual participation in the Charlotte Pride Festival quarterly participation for the major LGBTQI and A event, and they're working about other equity issues for the community as well. Next slide. Public relations. The Public Relations Subcommittee is working on making sure that the community is aware of all of the things that the Community Relations Committee is working on. They have a newsletter distribution of about 2,400 subscribers currently, and it also goes out to all of the 8,000 city employees as well as the city 6,000 county employees as well. Next slide. Race and cultural relations. They met with the city and economic development to discuss Albemarle Road Corridor Project and the effect on the international business and residents in the area. They attended the welcoming of the Charlotte Conference to learn methods to better work with persons of multicultural. Conducted outreach at the international festivities. So those were the latest activities that they had on that subcommittee. Next slide. Special events. Again, the subcommittees assisted in, with the planning of the Dr. Martin Luther King holiday celebration. They hosted a town hall meeting to address community concerns. They also were a part of the open house that Community Relations had this past year, and worked with the Police Community Relations Awards as well. Next slide. So moving forward, the CRC remains dedicated to promoting harmony, addressing the community concerns, working to support city and county, the priorities to make Charlotte a place where people can live, work, and play. And they identified some of the challenges and also some of the solutions that they had towards those challenges. As I mentioned, some of the challenges was member turnover due to attendance, member engagement, and subcommittee balance. To those, the member turnover attendance was a way that they felt like the best way it could be addressed was through having a different opportunity or access to the meetings, and the virtual component was one that they felt like would be the best solution for them. So they did make that recommendation, and they have that in place now. Better alignment of the projects, ensuring that they were looking at what is relative to the community now and trying to align the work a little bit in a way that the subcommittees are addressing those issues and that work. And then also the subcommittee balance was one, just making sure that as opposed to the full committee members going to one subcommittee, making sure that there was equitable support at each one of those subcommittees moving forward. Still allowing them to work with any other subcommittee that they want to, but the focus would be that there was balance on all of the subcommittees. Next slide. So just looking ahead, Community Relations Committee still wants to empower, collaborate, engage opportunities for all. The way they want to empower is by removing the barriers and making sure that there's equity of access. To collaborate, making sure that we're having intentional and relative conversations with the community. To engage by facilitating dialogues, bridging a connection to diverse community, being a builder of community and harmony. And then the opportunities for all is just promoting fairness and the equity to be a part of the group. So those were the things that they have worked on, some of the things that they're looking forward to working on and addressing ahead. And they do have developed the first annual plan, and they do have a plan to address things in the next 3 years as well. So with that, next slide. We have our chair here, Vanessa, if there are any additional questions, and if we have addressed all your concerns, just let us know.
Thank you. Vanessa, can you come forward, please?
Over there, I'm just going over there. She's over there. Okay. Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Well, thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. I know that we just gotten an overview. Yes, she has. She did when she was over there. We've gotten an overview of the CRC committee. I'd love to hear from you directly, your experience on CRC, what you see as some of the strengths and what some of the opportunities are.
So the strengths in terms of the membership or just in the community? Okay. All right. The strengths of the CRC definitely come with the members, but a lot of times some members come in with a different expectation, or at least it has been up until more recently, they had a different expectation of what they were coming to the CRC to do. So they thought that they saw certain community issues and they would come here and automatically they would do it. That would be a part of what they would do. Even though the subcommittee said something different, still when you go somewhere, you're like, okay, if this is what you're doing, that's what we'll be doing as well. And they hear the name occasionally. So we had a lot of people with a lot of different strengths in terms of their skill set with computers, whether it's networking or organizing, their work in the community. There's people who have like banking and accounting, things like that, which helped when we were trying to do some fundraising. And so we have a lot of people with a lot of different strengths, but initially, one of the biggest problems is that they didn't have anywhere to go. They didn't feel they had anything to do on the CRC because the subcommittees were not structured in a way, like they're clearly defined on what they do. And so some of the things they wanted to do in the community, they didn't find a place here, so they left. And then so that affected some of the opportunities that we had. There were always opportunities, but you also have to have membership to be able to go out there. So when we had issues with attendance, that also affected that as well, because technically I think we weren't supposed to meet at all in person until the governor lifted the COVID
State of emergency?
Yes, yeah, that's right. State of emergency. Yeah, I was like, no, it's something. Yeah. So until then, we weren't really able to meet in person. So that really kind of diminished the capacity that we had to do a lot of work in the community outside of something in the open air. Like, we did a COVID vaccine clinic, and we were working with the police to give out food and things like that. But the opportunities now are much more open, so I'm really excited. So they're identifying them, and I'll say that technically, really, the subcommittees are really super new, and I would really say that they started coming into existence, like really coming into who they are in January. So we're really only 3 months in. But so far with their choosing projects to do with the youth, CRC Pride is doing great. They're off to a really great start. Our PR department is doing great. They're updating our orientation, and they're really looking toward working with the community to get our newsletter together instead of them writing it individually. We have opportunities within the community to really address race and cultural issues. So like even this month, our meeting's going to be at the Asian Library, which will be really great. So come on out, all of you. So there's a lot of different opportunities, but some of the biggest ones we're seeing are the ones that we really weren't able to address, and that's really with the youth and the immediate acute issues in the community, as well as LGBTQIA+ issues. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the floor for any questions or comments. I don't see anybody online with anything.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have
I'm sorry, did you have a question?
a number of questions. So, Mr. Bradley, going back so that I can have some clarification. So, full disclosure, I was an active participant of Community Relations Committee for 15 years. So with the new committee alignments, I'm trying to understand, because there was value in community relations, the police awards being the community relations police awards versus just the overall umbrella of special events. How did that come? Can you give me some background on us renaming that?
There was actually not really a renaming. They actually have police community relations under special events, where it only just offered an opportunity where, again, what we mentioned, there were like full committee members just gravitating to maybe one particular program because it was exciting. There was not equity and balance in terms of having support around all of them. So to make sure that it had equitable support, it was placed under the special events along with MLK. And that way you had more people to kind of be able to help support both of the events. So the Police Community Relations Awards hasn't changed, it just received more support by being under a different name of a subcommittee.
Councilwoman Mayfield, if I might add to Terry's response, if you look at all of the previous subcommittees of the Community Relations Committee and the work that was done under those subcommittees and compare them to the new subcommittees, essentially what has changed is the name or the way that we identify the work. The actual work that we were doing is still going on, but under just different names.
I can see that there's value in having, excuse me, that title identification. And Mr. Bradley, you gave me a great segue because I'm also trying to understand the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Parade and Festival has historically been a separate event where you had community that had the opportunity to be engaged. But I know for this year, there were some changes. There wasn't a parade. There were some other changes. So has an event that's been happening for more than 30 years, has the model of it been changed as to how the MLK Memorial and Parade, used to be Parade and Memorial, now I guess just Memorial, how that has changed?
No, nothing's changed with the Martin Luther King holiday celebration. It is a joint venture with Community Relations as well as other partners as well. We have the county, we have Mecklenburg Men, we have different partners that actually put together that event. So it's not just a CRC event.
So was this a one-time event where we did not have a parade, or is that going to be moving forward?
Yeah, we didn't do the parade since COVID, and to kind of gradually move back into it, we said let's have a March 1st, but next year we would have the parade.
So the parade will be returning.
Right.
Now, you noted at the beginning of the presentation, our CRC at a glance, that council appoints, the mayor appoints Mecklenburg County. Do you have a breakdown? And you don't have to have that right now. You can submit that to us at some point through staff. I want to know if the 16 members that council has appointed, if we have our 16, or out of that 11, 12 members that we are short right now, how many in that 12 fall within the city, within the county, and so forth, so that we can make sure, because the turnover has been concerning for me. And I know that attendance is a big piece, which leads me to an additional question of when subcommittees have their meetings, is attendance counted for the subcommittee meetings or only for the primary meetings?
We do it from both committees. I think it has varied over the years, but more recently, we make sure we do it from both committees. So you get credit for being a part of the subcommittee meetings as well as the full committee meetings.
So with our high turnover that unfortunately is leaning towards the attendance, that is both accounting for them participating in the actual meetings as well as their subcommittee meetings?
They get credit for being in both. I think
because it's 3 consecutive, if I'm incorrect, please correct me. Is if you miss 3 consecutive meetings, then that will be grounds for
removal.
Basically removal.
Right.
Or if you don't attend at least 75% of the meetings. And I think you have to be at a meeting, present at a meeting for at least, is it 50% or 70%?
Yeah. Can we just clarify quickly? So for the meetings, it's not just 3 consecutive I apologize. It's not just 3 consecutive meetings. So it'd be like 3 consecutive monthly CRC meetings, like the full board meeting, 3 of those in a row, not the subcommittee meetings, though.
So that's why, and Assistant City Manager asked you to know that I've asked this question before, because a lot of our participation with Community Relations Committee are members who are working in the community. So if something's happening with work, unfortunately, we went through a pandemic, people are ill, I want to make sure that we're not penalizing you for missing the big meeting, especially when, to be perfectly honest, there's been a lot of conversation that's made its way my way that the actual meetings weren't as productive for some people. The subcommittee meetings were more productive, so if they were attending and staying active and getting things done in the subcommittee, but weren't at the larger committee, I want to make sure that we had the flexibility and that you all had the flexibility to identify the difference versus, okay, you've missed X meetings, but if those meetings, we spend an hour and a half, 2 hours talking in circles and not really addressing a particular issue, but in my subcommittee, we're able to actually move forward, identify, and get to work, that's going to be a more substantial committee meeting for me. So as we're moving to a virtual option, I just hope somewhere when we're looking at how to strengthen, we're taking that into consideration also, especially knowing, again, if the main committee meeting wasn't one where I felt like I was really able to benefit, not only to learn for myself to take back to the community or to be able to contribute, if there was more power in the subcommittee and that's where the focus was, making sure we were giving people credit what credit is due when we think about that turnover, because we see a lot of applications and a lot of vacancies in community relations. I'm glad it's only 12 that are out there right now, but when you think about a 45 members, council only appoints 16 of them. So I want to make sure that when we're appointing, that we're setting community members up to be successful, as well as you all are getting quality representation on the committees.
Ms. Mayfield, we're on the same page with regards to the type of members that we want to participate in the Community Relations Committee. A lot of the attendance and issues that we're having, and a lot of the fact that many people are coming and going off of the committee, there's no one simple reason as to why that is happening. A lot of it has to do with what has been city policy. There was a time that the city allowed for excused absences, but the city said we're not going to do that anymore.
Oh, we removed that.
The city requires that we count attendance for the full committee meetings of CRC, but they won't allow us to account subcommittee meetings. So if we're going to make this work, we're going to need some help from you members of council. Change your policy regarding excused absences, change your policies regarding attendance at subcommittee meetings, because that's why, not only with Community Relations Committee, but other subcommittees, other committees that you have, that's why people are coming and going. We've made it more difficult than it really needs to be.
That is extremely helpful. Thank you for sharing that, because that's what we need, so that when we speak with staff regarding how to create a better experience, knowing that that has been a hurdle and that's a hurdle that we created, is very helpful when we're looking at updating the language.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. For the community equity, put down the guns, pick up the weights. What's the outreach plan on that? So we're partnering with a organization?
There's a subcommittee member that is wanting to take the lead on that initiative, and he has a partnership with working with Jim, and he wanted to find a different way of engaging the youth, and so he said that this might be an alternative as opposed to, and working with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department as well, this might be a way to engage the youth in a different way, give them something, an activity or an outlet to be involved in, and they're getting ready to try this initiative. I think they just made a decision maybe 2 meetings ago that this is what they wanted to work on. So we'll see the fruits of that, I guess, soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Any additional, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I think it might be more a comment than a question. I think council entered on this kind of exercise of looking at all of our committees, places we appoint people, to figure out how we can better utilize and better work with and through. And it just jumps out that it seems like CRC, there could be potential there. Being that how many people are on it, being that it's a county and a city appointed board, being that there's such a breadth of topic areas, I just wonder how, when we meet week to week and we're trying to figure out, for instance, how to get, I go back to the first committee meeting earlier today, when we're trying to get community area planning process attended, those meetings attended. Seems like the CRC, the folks that are on it, the work that's being done could be a natural resource. And I'm sure that that's already happening. I know that's already happening. But I guess, again, I just think, seems like this board in particular, not just from a housing and neighborhood standpoint, but our general work, there might be some, I don't know, ways that stuff that we say, they can help us connect to a more diverse group of citizens, I guess. Just putting that out there.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And it has been used in that way. By and large, a good example would be public input. Some city departments will come before the Community Relations Committee, and if they want to make sure that they share the information and it goes out, they'll use the CRC to do that. We'll get assignments from the city manager's office, and sometimes it's kind of like an afterthought. That might be a good fit for CRC, and we'll get those exercises to kind of work on as well. But for public input, that would be a good tool for individuals to come into that space, and there are at least 45 members that you can get that information in front of.
Yeah, and I would even say, how can we, is there a way to automate that? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if there's somebody that's on the board that's paying attention to our meetings sometimes, and maybe on a rotating basis, and, I don't know, maybe it's a culture of the way that things get done. So that, not that we're assigning things, for the board to do. One, we don't want to micromanage our boards either. We want them to have some self-autonomy in the work that we do. But I think as again, we kind of entered into this to say, hey, we could be doing more with the way information goes back and forth from our dais through our committees and appointments. And it's just something we kind of pay attention to when we have opportunities. Let's jump on it, I guess,
And I think one of the other requests is that we have the annual report, but there was more opportunities to report or provide updates.
No, I think what you're talking about is, this committee can request at any time to have information come in. So yes, your annual report will be circulated, but if there is a need for a deeper dive, the committee could call you in to do that.
Right.
It will be good to see the full annual report, which accounts for not only the work of the committee members, which we've talked about this afternoon, but it also accounts for the work of the staff, which expands the amount of work by 2 or 3 times what you've actually heard today, with enforcement of the city and the county's fair housing law, enforcement of the city's non-discrimination ordinance, enforcement of the city's source of income protections policy. The ADA work for the City of Charlotte is actually done through the Community Relations Committee. We run a dispute settlement program that takes 2,000 to 3,000 cases out of the criminal justice system each year and resolve those through a mediation, saving tons of money for the court system, saving citizens money who don't have to get lawyers to go to court to protect themselves, and just continuing to do the work of the Community Relations Committee, which essentially is to ameliorate the current effects of past discrimination and racism, because what happened 400 years ago, 200 years ago, 50 years ago, last week still impacts how citizens in this country by identity still interact with one another. And when I started this work 47 years ago, well, 42 years ago in community relations, I was foolish enough to think that I would work myself out of a job because we would get rid of all of this stuff. But apparently I have not done a good job because it seems to be getting worse.
Thank you, Willie. I do want to be sensitive, so there's Councilmember Johnson has a question, and then we have 2 other items.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Ratchford, for the presentation. I just want to be clear. Are you recommending that we, as city council, change the policy for the attendance, the subcommittee attendance?
I think that if you want a situation where members of the various boards that you all appoint have more opportunity to participate and do the work that you have, that you expect of them, then you can't make it hard on them by not allowing for excused absences or not allowing attendance to be counted for subcommittee meetings. I mean, we had a couple of situations this year where CRC members had babies and needed to be out 3 months, and we were asking if we could get some consideration for that. We couldn't even get consideration for that. So there's some things, if you all could change it so that there's more consideration of the members and their time, I think that would be helpful.
So what I'd like to say is, like right now, 2 council members are meeting virtually. I was in a meeting earlier, and the city attorney, the CEO of CATS, and the committee chairperson was meeting virtually. So there's an opportunity for us to streamline processes, and virtual meetings are still necessary because someone did have COVID, and productive. So I agree with you if we're working with folks who are volunteering their time to do very, very important work on this committee and all of our city committees. If we can make things easier for them, and like Mayor Pro Tem said, not to micromanage and give them the autonomy. These are leaders, they're volunteering their time, so I think we should be respectful of that. So I would like to make a motion, Madam Chair, if I can, that we change the policy for this committee and any committee that, that our committee has the ability to do so. And perhaps this will be adopted citywide, but I definitely would like to make the motion that we change the policies for our committees, that that the subcommittee attendance does count in the policy. Is that, that's my motion.
I think, so from a policy
I think you're going where I'm going, but I did want to ask the attorney to clarify.
Thank you. Anna Schloinis with the City Attorney's Office. I'm not the attorney that represents the City Clerk's office, but I feel pretty confident in saying that any amendment to the boards and commissions policy, including anything related to attendance, would certainly need to be adopted by the full council and apply to all the committees, unless you changed your policy to reflect that there might be different attendance for different committees.
Okay, thank you. Well, Madam Chair, can we make the recommendation to the full council as a committee?
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly second to recommend to the full council to update our attendance policy for our boards and commissions to include subcommittee attendance as part of the calculation.
Even though she just stole my
Is there any discussion? All right, hearing no discussion, all those in favor, please indicate with an aye.
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 That makes 1, 2, 3. Ms. Molina? All right, it'll be a 3-0 then vote at this point that it passes. We'll move that forward to the broader council meeting. I did have a couple of things, and then to your point, ACM, we got to move. I, like many of my colleagues, have the concerns around the turnover. I'm particularly interested in this idea of there being a disconnect between the expectation of what they're going to be doing and their experience. I'd like to also see a lot more specific linkage to the policies that are being discussed at the council level. I think about our equity policy, it's overarching, right? While certainly I can appreciate the space for particular events that are led by the CRC out in the community, I really think that if we're going to have 45 people in a room on a continual or virtually on a continual basis, and the role is about increasing equity and impacting our community in that way, I think it has to show up in a much more concrete way in the policies. I think about the UDO and the community area planning process right now. We know that we are actively seeking feedback from community members. That to me is, to Mayor Pro Tem's point, a no-brainer. How do we make sure that that is a part of stakeholder engagement on every policy or program that we're putting forward coming out of these communities? I'd love to see more of a linkage to our neighborhood leaders. And then finally, as we think about communications in particular, I know we talked about the newsletter that goes out. I know we now have City Speaks. We got the organizational contact list for the neighborhood. How do we consolidate those communications in as much as we can? I know some of their subject matter is real specific, but how do we make sure that people are getting the full picture of what's going on at the city? So I'd like to see this one come back before us in the next couple of months. Would love to, as I'm sure you're going to go back to the committee and report out and give feedback as far as what's going on, what some of the council has said. So would love to have you all back here in the coming months to talk about what else we can do to increase the effectiveness of this committee. That is all that we have on that item. We'll move on to the Housing Trust Fund tune-up.
Grab this one. Okay, as Mr. Wooten is coming up to the table, come on up here. So the Housing Trust Fund tune-up is something that originated early last year when the then Great Neighborhoods Committee was developing its calendar year 2022 work plan. And in anticipation of a November of 22 bond referendum with an additional $50 million, the idea was for staff to think through what are opportunities for enhancement around the Housing Trust Fund and to ensure that we were aligned with council expectations and priorities as we think about deploying the money. So with that, I'll turn it over to Division Manager Wooten.
Thank you. It's good to see you all. Thank you. It's good to see you all again. So I'm going to run back through this information, and last time you saw some ideas, and now you're seeing kind of a path forward in this presentation. So we're going to just revisit what the purpose of the tune-up was. I have 3 slides that go into 3 areas of improvement, and then we'll talk about a timeline. So the purpose was, and this was a council request to come to us and say, you know, we've had this trust fund running for 20 years. What can we do differently? What can we improve? What can we streamline? And so staff has kicked this around. Staff has spoken to developers several occasions, including showing them a very similar presentation about a path forward, to which they were almost unanimously excited about. Clarifying your priorities and then evaluating some new approaches, which you're going to see in the slides moving forward. So in these 3 categories, the first one is enhancing the application process. We're going to talk about strengthening value propositions, and we're going to talk about avenues for innovation. So enhancing the application process. So this is one area that developers were not overly critical about, but said that there was room for some improvement. So some of the things that we're going to do here are, 1, streamline the application process for the developers. We're going to ask for less paper that's more impactful. We're going to receive some information in different formats so that there's less opportunities for error. And we are going to just improve that processing speed so that we can get you responses back to these RFPs more quickly. We're going to continue with the 2 HTF rounds per year. This works really well for the Housing Finance Agency cycle. They do, the 9% really come through in the fall and winter, and then the 4% are kind of all year long. And so we have a winter RFP that is very 9% heavy, and then a summer round that is typically exclusively 4% in other types of projects that you'll see. We floated this idea of a two-tiered review approach when we did the initial tune-up recommendations. We also put this into the fall RFP just to try it out. What this does is it allows a developer two opportunities to apply for funding. The first tier has several council objectives in it, meeting a certain target of cost per unit, meeting a certain locational requirement, agreeing to take a mix of trust funds and a federal funding source. And then all other projects fall into tier 2. So what we tell developers is you can apply under either tier, but you're going to get a first review under that first tier. So we tried this fall, and Mr. Heath is going to bring you recommendations up in the next couple of weeks. But I can tell you, to an application, every single developer found a way to get into that tier 1, and it meets at least one of your priorities when submitting that project, be it a lower cost per unit, be it agreeing to take federal funds mixed with their trust funds, or agreeing to put a project into one of your high priority locations like District 6 and District 7. So we're very pleased with the results of that. We hope that holds, and we think that it's a good approach going forward to get you more projects that align with your specific council priorities. The next two things are new RFPs. So it's very hard when it comes to NOAA preservation and land acquisitions to do those in the 2 rounds because these are projects of opportunity. Land comes onto the market and it sells very quickly. NOAA projects come onto the market. There's usually multiple bidders involved and they are gone very quickly. So the developers there don't have the luxury to wait for the next round. And so our solution to this is releasing 2 RFPs, one specifically focused on NOAA, the other specifically focused on land acquisition, and allow those to stay open and for developers to apply to them as projects become available. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in some upcoming slides. So that's the application process. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me, and we're going to talk about strengthening value propositions. So these are also items that we, unless we hear an objection today, we'll start rolling into the RFPs. The first one is incentivizing ownership rights and rights of first refusal, and ownership rights and rights of first refusal, which really connects into item B here, requesting longer lengths of affordability with a target on perpetuity. What we know is we need to secure your affordable housing assets longer and to whatever extent we can secure them forever, because we've seen what's happened in the community. Things are not getting less expensive, they're only getting more expensive. So targeting your investments to create longer term assets for the community really strengthens the value propositions and makes it really worth your investment in these projects. So under the first one, if a nonprofit owns it, they're typically are mission driven and they're not going to be selling that even if some restriction comes off of this. So think about DreamKeep Partners, think about Mosaic Development Community. We have lots of great nonprofits that do this work, and I'm sure I'm leaving a couple, the folks who did Movement on Freedom, all of those are nonprofit sponsored. The way that a for-profit partner can participate in this is this with this right of first refusal, where if for some reason they plan to sell out, the city has the first opportunity or one of its agents to buy back into that project to maintain its affordability. And then just lengthening those deed restrictions on these properties. 30 years is just, it's not long enough anymore, and we need to do what we can to expand those periods of affordability for a longer period of time. And then what we've heard and are responding to is broaden the funding sources, find different ways to move different pots of your funding and our partners' funding into this work. So you will see in upcoming recommendations that it's not going to be just a trust fund recommendation. There's going to be some home funds recommended in there to offset the spend on your housing trust fund. The city also receives a lot of HOPWA dollars. These are funds for specifically supporting families that are living with HIV or AIDS. It is able to be invested into multifamily development. So you may see on a future RFP where those funds may come into play to do this work as well. And then incentivizing shovel-ready projects. So we've heard from you time and time again that you don't want your money sitting in the Treasury, you want your money in the ground, out in the community working. And so we are getting more strict with our developers. We are tightening up timeframes where you may see in future rounds where the city staff doesn't recommend a project because the timeline on that project is just too far out, and there are other projects that are going to be available sooner. So let's put your money into a project where it's actually going to go into the dirt and have that developer that has that longer term project come back and request money when they get closer to the starting line. And then the final section is avenues for innovation. So we talked a little bit at our last meeting, this concept of team force housing, that one of those partners that can come into one of these deals may be a large employer where they make an investment into some of our affordable housing projects and then are able to utilize some of the units that are realized through that investment to support their job creation and economic development processes inside of those organizations. You've seen this in the Hill Rock Estates project that Atrium participated in. They used some of the housing in that development to help support their job training programs inside of Atrium. So not only when an employee comes into that organization and they get put onto a job pathway, they have an option to use some of this lower cost housing while they're in that pathway and they're moving up in Atrium. And so we think that that's worthy to be replicated. The UDO is quickly approaching. It goes live on June 1, and you have some great incentives for affordable housing development inside of your UDO. What we're going to do to streamline the work through the trust fund and really trying to keep things on track with planning is we're going to have them do the submittals for all of the UDO bonuses when they do the HTF application so that they can do all of that work at the same time. You know what the funding request is, but you're also going to know what bonuses, if they're going to use bonuses, and what bonuses they're going to use, and we can provide that to you all at the same time. This is a great way to leverage the investments that you're making with the great policy work that you've already done inside of the UDO. And the final one, so in your NOAA, your adopted NOAA policy, it typically starts talking about NOAA units, looking at NOAA developments at the 50 unit and higher end of development. This is an area where I think that we can innovate. We've seen developers talking about some really promising developments that are in the 20 to 50 range. So we may be bringing to you projects in the NOAA RFP that are actually at a lower unit count, but they really fit into this niche missing middle area of housing that we think that it's important to support and may yield even more units than just going after the larger NOAA projects. So just a little bit more on the two new RFPs you're going to see. So this is something that we've been doing kind of on an ad hoc outside of an RFP. And what this does is it's going to set out very clearly to developers what types of projects that you're interested in and will consider. We're going to put all of that information into the NOAA RFP. It will become rolling. It will affirm your policy. And again, looking at possibly those smaller NOAA developments. But what this really does is it creates a firm pathway for when a developer has a potential NOAA project that they know what they need to provide us and how to access funds to bring that forward for your consideration. So we're moving this forward quickly. We will open it, and then we will close it when funds are exhausted or when we need to make a change to that RFP and we need to issue a new RFP. We'll close one and open up another one. But hopefully will come a direct pathway to get you to these NOAA investments. And then the next one is the land RFP. So there should be one more slide after this. There it is. This is a response, so this is something we're trying. You haven't done this yet, so we're going to give it a try. This is in response to some really good but smaller developers who land is expensive, and good land is very expensive. So this gives the developers another avenue on a way to secure that property while they're going through the development process. So this will be very narrow. We're thinking about your corridors of opportunity. We're thinking about your transit-oriented development areas. And it will be a short-term loan to allow them to acquire that land and hold it while they're developing out the larger project. Then, like you've seen with some of the land, the city-owned land work that we've done, where the developers come back and say, here's the land that we've been working on, here's the project, here's what we're going to need to finish this project out. You'll get that same kind of follow-up for one of these developers. So you'll make a decision to invest in the land. They'll do the work to put together a full proposal to you and then bring it back. But what this does is it allows us to miss less opportunities. Where there's a piece of land, it's a good piece of land, city staff is in concurrence that affordable housing should be developed there. We just need someone to get a hold of it. It's also much quicker to acquire and dispose with a nonprofit developer than it is the city doing it themselves. So here's a timeline for you on moving this work forward. So you're going to hear from Mr. Heath in the upcoming council meeting on recommendations around your last round of RFPs that came in. We have some great projects for you to consider. The developers are really doing a good job bringing you high quality projects, and we look forward to showing those to you on the 10th. We are moving quickly to release a NOAA RFP. We're targeting May. If we can get it out quicker, we will. But right now, we're targeting May to release that. The land RFP will be released in June, and then you'll see your next full HTF RFP in July that will incorporate all of the things that I just shared with you. So some of those new things that we just discussed, you'll start seeing that in the responses to your July RFP. And that is the end of my planned remarks.
Thank you. Exciting things. I don't see anybody online with a hand. I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Mayfield and then Mayor Pro Tem. I'm sorry. I need to eat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations, really great presentation. Thank you for all the work that you and the team have been doing. And from hearing not only the questions and concerns that council have, but more importantly, what the community has, I just have a few clarifying questions. So going back through the slides, slide number 4, the enhanced application process, of which this question is going to be tied to the last slide, where we have for E, add RFP for land acquisition to protect affordable housing opportunities in strategic locations. I would like to encourage us to think beyond the corridors of opportunity. Okay. Because if we go back and we look at the TLC by CLT housing program, that was a really great idea at the time. If you drive through Camp Green, which was the neighborhood that I started it in today, where we started the program, where homes were purchased for under $80,000, you now have homes that have been purchased, new homes that have been built and sold. That is now a neighborhood that has $600,000-$700,000 homes in it. So we also need to consider the role that government plays when we go in and start investing in areas that we historically did not invest in. that lets business and other community know growth is good, but to the detriment of what? So you have an entire community that now is looking at potential displacement or have been displaced based on our investments. So when we look at the areas, I would like for us to just step back and go back in, actually drive through some of the areas that were identified when we used to talk about that crescent and wedge. A lot of those individuals are no longer there because they have been priced out of the community. So we want to just consider how our role plays in. On slide 5, the strength and value propositions of city investments. For item C, Mr. Wooten, you mentioned that for broadened funding sources by including federal funding and inviting multifamily participation, HOPWA might be included in that. You don't have to do it now, but it would be great if you can, prior to our rollouts, if you can get some information to break that down a little bit more. Like, I would like to know how much of our HOPWA dollars are currently being utilized out of that budget line item, and how do you see us maintaining the goal that we have around making sure that there's housing accessible to a segment of our community that has the greatest need, so that that doesn't get lost. But it would be helpful to know, where are we? How much is being utilized, and how many of our residents and neighbors are being serviced? We're looking at the expand avenues for innovation. I think if I'm understanding you correctly, for A, incentivize employer participation. That's if we have a large company, like I think you mentioned Atrium.
Correct.
Where they're assisting with land purchase.
Yeah, they make an investment they come into the deal as a partner, and one of the incentives that they receive for partnering, they're making a philanthropic investment, but then they're also utilizing some of the units of housing that are realized in that development to help with their job training programs at Atrium. So it's really a win-win in one of those developments.
So the overarching for all of the PowerPoints, where we have one or more, I personally would say remove the one and focus on the more, because we have a clear need. And our for-profit, our market rate community, they're not really having as many challenges building. So we don't necessarily have the ability to say, outside of our votes, and it takes 6 to say, we know that we need to be a city where our workers can afford to live here. Let's give more credit or points to those that's coming to the table with more to address our needs, opposed to, if you do one of these 5, then that at least gets you into the space, versus you that have 3 of our 5 or 5 of our 5, you go to the top. Whereas you that's in the 1, you don't go for that first tier. You would probably qualify for the next round, depending on what you're doing. But those that are coming to the table, and that be the incentive for that tier 1, is 3 or more of our 5 gets you into that discussion. Doesn't guarantee, but gets you into that discussion, because I think that would help us to create a better balance. Because again, right now, we're having a challenge with our workforce being in that scheme. If we can't afford for the workers to live here, then your company is not going to have the workers that you need. So will we be creating a self-fulfilling prophecy if we don't look at some ways to be more creative? But I love the opportunities that you're presenting to us. This is really thinking outside of the box with things that you may have wanted to do years ago, but we didn't have a chance to move forward with. These are some really good suggestions. I just want to just throw in a couple of little pieces for us to streamline it in a way where we really hit our target by identifying who is our target. Who is our target workers? We say our lower the minimum number of NOAA units from that 50 below. But again, who gets the benefit from those when we have a system in place where it's first come, first served, but we have residents that have been here for a decade or more that haven't figured out how to work the system. So I just think we have some ways to be much more targeted with how we're helping our current residents and potentially those that may be coming. But my focus, full transparency, is those who are already here, not those who may be coming in the next day or two. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Winston, I see Councilmember Johnson raised her hand. We'll follow up with her, and then we'll come directly to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify that did I hear you say that we are going to be looking at developers who are building 20% AMI housing?
No, I think I was talking about the number of units, the count of units. Right now, your NOAA
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm like, okay, because, we do have individuals in the city that have, are earning $700 or $800 a month on disability, and their income's not going to improve, or individuals with pending disability. The Social Security system, there's a 2 to 5 year wait for individuals who are disabled and getting an income. So I'd really like to see more incentives for that lower income base. So many times we hear that that's the role of Enlivian or some other entity, but we know those wait lists are extraordinary. So my argument has always been that there are so many folks in Tent City who are disabled or pending disability, but they'll never, they can't afford 50% AMI or even the 30% is if there's a standard rate, that's challenging for them also. So I just want to continue to lift up those who are in the very, very, very low income base. That those are the homeless folks, and we just have to really consider them. So if there's any additional incentives, for more 30% housing, I think we should consider that as well. And I also want to support what Councilmember Mayfield just said as far as the ranking of the developers. That one or more, we should, we should give more priority to developers who are really, really meeting our needs. So, more than one. I like what you said, 3 or more, or even a ranking system, and really start to reward developers that are seeking to help us solve one of our most critical needs in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, real quick, I like the improved, I'll say improvements or changes, enhancing the application process. Wondering, thinking about a conversation that we had early in a prior committee meeting around CBI, is there any opportunity as we're looking at housing trust fund deals to provide, let's say, goals or prioritize proposals that utilize minority, women, small business, local developers in their developer group? I'm looking at, really kind of thought about it when you were going over number 3, area 3, as well as the NOAA request for proposals, some of those smaller NOAA opportunities. I don't know, it just seems like it could be, when you talk about combining priorities.
Sure.
This could potentially be, I don't know if there are any legal restrictions to it, but it seems like we have a lot of leeway in how we're looking at our proposals.
Yeah, so Director Heath and I were just kind of talking on the side. We don't have that as a requirement that our developers
Not a
have.
requirement.
Right, it's not a requirement, right, for our developers. So if you think about the housing mix and we're funding a development, there's not a requirement in that to say you have to use a minority firm. We don't have that built in. Is that what you were asking?
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
when we're looking at, let's say a request for proposal comes in, if there are two that are pretty equal and they're
Sure.
You know, if we would say, hey, well, this one is using, we can verify that there's a minority minority member or a local member or a woman member of the development team, that this, we can kind of weight that more, to balance that out. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Sort of like a goal, like a CBI goal,
Yeah, and so there's not like an incremental requirement on top of what our normal
Not a
standards would be.
requirement, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
but, Mark Etheridge with Ascent Real Estate, remember when he brought in the Pepper Tree opportunity, I think that, they do in excess of 90% in terms of the rehab component of the NOAA projects are focused on minority businesses. So that, I'm just kind of agreeing with you that that was a distinguishing factor in his proposal that for us was meaningful enough to share with council. So we would continue to do that for sure.
Well, I guess I would go from a
Yeah.
question to, I think it would be worth exploring if we can add a component to that, if that's legally feasible, if we can get the right, because I hear, especially from NOAA situations, because again, I see you saying reducing the number, that we hear people that like, you just can't find the size NOAAs, or it's too far out there, or people that are working through to becoming small developers in town just can't compete for the type of support that is only for a certain level of the developer. So I'm wondering if there's, would like for us to explore.
Yeah, we'll definitely explore that. I'll check with our legal staff to make sure that we're not running afoul of anything, but, that's what the RFP is for. It's to let the community know what your preferences are and let them respond to those preferences. So I will check on that, but that's certainly that we can put in as a preference into RFPs in the future.
Thank you. I want to say Pam said there was something on the books, if there were spent city dollars, that it was part of the program already. So I think it's feasible.
Yeah, HTF has a CBI participation requirement already. So
Yeah.
I think the question is incrementally, can we ask them, can they go above that requirement?
Okay, just a couple of things on this particular item on my end. Just wanted to highlight a couple of things. I love to see first of all, I love everything I see here. You guys continue to come out of Housing and Neighborhood Services with amazing innovation, so thank y'all for that. Perpetuity, I'm really happy to see that. I'm interested in, as it relates to perpetuity, home ownership. That's the one piece that I'm really looking for here. I know that a lot of this is focused on multifamily. I'm wondering if there's any discussion around how to enable owner occupants as they compete in the market. And I know we're running out of time, so we don't have to necessarily answer this question right now, but perhaps if there's some time between this meeting and the next one, we could maybe add a little of that information. And then I'm curious about, from an ownership standpoint with the city, when the city invest in an HTF project or RFP project, I know that we have a position in terms of the financing, but do we actually own a portion of the development?
It's a great question. We do not. We are not an owner. We act more, we provide typically a debt product. So we're basically a subordinate financer in the project. In the tax credit projects, it's really important for the investors to maintain the ownership of the investment, because that's actually why they provide the cash into the deal, and that's how they get their tax benefits, is because their ownership in that deal creates the tax shelter to make the whole program work. So we do have restrictions on it, and we do have a loan against that property. So our position looks more like a bank's position than it looks like an investor's position.
Gotcha. Okay. I'd be interested to see if there was anything that we could do in that way. And then I just wanted to call it, I saw in my email today that the state budget process is underway, and they are actually looking for, they've got an application for particular projects to be funded by the state budget. So I don't know, as we think about broadening funding resources or broadening funding sources, if that's an opportunity. And then finally, and this might be a little strange, but as I think about land acquisition, I know that we want to enable land acquisition within the city of Charlotte, but I'm looking at it in terms of the city of Charlotte acting as an investor to surrounding communities. What have we investigated as far as it relates to purchasing in surrounding communities. We know we've talked about our regional approach and the fact that frankly, it's getting too expensive to be in the city limits. So to the extent that we know we're growing outward, what can we do as a city to proactively invest in our surrounding communities to improve our position? I'd be interested
It's an
to hear
intriguing
about that.
question. I think you're going to see more of that with your home dollars. We're in a consortium that, with your home program, you're actually allowed to go outside of the city limits. So I was on the phone this week with the town of Matthews, who has a really exciting project coming up, and they were talking to us about funding. So I think that you're going to see those opportunities coming up, but we'll do some more work around what additional opportunities there may be in that area.
Thank you. Well, great work. ACM, I'll turn it over to you. I know we're at time. I don't know what people's availability are, but what would you like to do with this last item?
We have options. So right now, this last item is scheduled to be on the agenda next Monday night with a request for council action. It's something that I mentioned to the committee in December. So when I was going through the list of available ARPA funding, you started with 47 million. Right now, you've got about 24 million left. This item here is a collaborative opportunity with Duke Energy where the city of Charlotte would invest in rehab in particular homes that need rehab in order to be ready for energy efficiency investments. And then in exchange, we would leverage our investment with Duke Energy agreeing to put money into energy efficiency in those very same homes. And in order for us to get this program off the ground, the RCA will have a request for $1 million of American Rescue Plan funding. The Housing Department, the Office of Sustainability, and the Budget Department are all aligned that this is a worthy use of the funds. We just wanted you to have a chance to hear about it before you see it on the RCA next week.
Gotcha.
So we don't really have to defer it.
Okay.
You could just keep it on the RCA next week and
Maybe
then,
send a pre-read.
yeah.
So that full council has an understanding of what the program is about. That way, when they're voting on the 10th, they understand it a little bit more. We could do it that way.
Absolutely. In particular, the requirements. As far as it relates to low income, I just know that some of our programs are underutilized because of those income requirements. So I don't know to the degree that we've got the ability to change those requirements. I definitely would be interested there. You had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The request is for 1 million. What we have is that for approximately 500 households, the spend would be around 4 million. Where's the other 3 million coming from?
I can answer that. So Duke Energy was directed by the North Carolina Utilities Commission to stand up this pilot program. They're investing $7.5 million throughout 3 different geographies. Charlotte is one of them. They'll be investing $4 million in the Charlotte geography. So what we're excited about is leveraging $1 million for their $4 million that will serve approximately 500 households in Charlotte.
And we're thinking about what Madam Chair mentioned, do we know what that income ratio is? Because one of the challenges are we create things for our members who are at the lowest income. They're also the ones that have the greatest challenge to get access to some of the things that we're providing because there's a cost with being energy efficient. So do we have flexibility or do we at least have a range?
So for the Duke pilot program, it's at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. And so our resources would step into the gap, and when they identify households that are high income, meeting their income qualification, or high energy use, meeting their income qualifications, and they identify that they cannot do that energy efficiency work because there's critical home issues, then that $1 million goes to service those critical issues so they can continue on and do their energy efficiency work.
So we say at or below 200%, but we don't have a dollar amount for what that looks like for, like, if we're out promoting it in the community, what is that? Is that under 70,000 for a family of 2, or is that 70,000 for a family of 4? And you don't have to have that right now, but that will be information that will be helpful prior to us voting on it to know exactly who is the target. As Madam Chair mentioned, we have funding out here that's not being spent up, for lack of a better word, because people aren't able to access it. How do we make sure that this is accessible?
So it's $50,000 for a family of 3. I anticipated this question.
And I can put in the pre-read what that looks like, and that is, again, the parameters that Duke Energy is working within that they were directed to do by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. So we're taking their parameters and we're leveraging our work to make it go farther.
So we do or we don't have flexibility in that? We have to stick within their parameters?
We do. In order to leverage both programs, we're going to have their parameters also be our parameters.
Okay, so we got to stick to this. When you bring it, family of 2, 3, and 4, please, because we have a lot of families that don't have children that still may qualify. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All righty. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you joining us, and thank you again. Great work. And we will see y'all at the next go-round, and that is be May 1st.
Madam Chair, just one quick thing. I just want to make sure our committee know that actually in our budget governance, in a governmental relation committee meeting this morning or this afternoon, we did do a referral on the boards and commissions discussion. So if we do have it referred to budget governmental in a budget governance and intergovernmental if we don't want to add that onto ours. The question, the referral that I supported, we are going to be talking about there, so it will be coming to full council.
Okay.
Just based on time, like we ran out of time today. We just wanted to make sure that you knew.
Sure. Thank you all. See you next time.
We need to have a motion.